The Northmen did not indulge in heavily processed food or high sugar intake, had a more balanced diet richer in protein comparative to their medieval counterparts, led quite an active life either on the farm or rowing on ships going Viking, did not struggle to breathe because of smog, and even used things like combs and tweezers for personal hygiene. So were they really healthier than us? Well, no. Actually, it would have been quite the nightmare to live in the Viking Age. One word here: parasites. And loads of them. Not just the external creeps like ticks and lice, but the ones growing inside you and twisting your entrails. A recent study reveals that Vikings were often plagued by intestinal worms. The research, which examined 1,000-year-old parasite eggs found in Viking feces, indicates that both Vikings and their domestic animals were heavily afflicted by parasites. They likely thrived in the unsanitary living conditions where humans and animals lived in close and unhygienic proximity. It is, however, fascinating to examine these ancient parasite eggs and determine their species. This allows us to understand the health issues people faced during the Viking Age and identify the types of domestic animals they kept in various locations. This study is part of a larger project led by Danish scientists who are tracing the evolutionary, demographic and health-related histories from early human settlements to the modern era. Having this additional dimension is thrilling for archaeologists as it allows us to explore questions that were previously unanswerable. For example, we can learn about past living conditions, the diseases people suffered, and whether they lived separately from their animals or shared their living quarters as peasants often did. In the study, parasite eggs from soil samples collected at a Viking settlement near Viborg were analyzed. These samples were taken from a latrine used between 1018 and 1030. The scientists first separated the ancient parasite eggs from the soil and then extracted their DNA. By sequencing this DNA, they were able to identify the specific parasite species and determine whether they infected humans. The results showed that the soil contained eggs from human-infecting roundworm and whipworm, as well as liver fluke, which infects cattle or sheep. Looking at the eggs alone does not reveal if they came from parasites infecting humans or animals, but through DNA analysis we can now confirm what was previously only suspected, that humans carried these parasites around 1,000 years ago. DNA sequencing of ancient parasite eggs offers a promising tool for exploring human migration. By analyzing the DNA of these eggs, scientists can trace how parasites, and therefore the humans who hosted them, spread across the globe. Just as humans originated from Africa, many human parasites likely share this origin and traveled worldwide as people migrated. By examining genetic differences between parasite populations, researchers can estimate where these parasites came from, revealing when humans arrived in the respective regions. If you lived during the Viking Age, you would likely have experienced symptoms from parasitic infections at some point in your life, including nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and weight loss. Tapeworms were a common affliction among Vikings and remained widespread across Europe until the mid-20th century. Many of these infections were likely acquired from consuming raw or undercooked fish and pork, which were staple foods. In mild cases, people infected with tapeworms might experience only minor discomfort, but more severe infections could lead to serious health issues. Fish tapeworms, for instance, could cause blood loss, while pork tapeworms could lead to seizures. The prevalence of tapeworm infections suggests that these populations frequently ate undercooked meat. Samples from various periods and locations, including sites from 500 BCE in Bahrain to the 19th century in the Netherlands, show that humans were commonly infected by parasites like the giant roundworm, Ascaris lumbricoides, and the human whipworm, Trichuris trichiura. These findings indicate that such parasitic infections spanned a broad geographic and historical range. In addition to human parasites, the scientists identified parasites originating from animals such as sheep, horses, dogs, pigs, and rodents. This suggests that humans often lived in close quarters with these animals, fostering conditions that allowed parasites to spread between species. At the Viking settlement near Viborg, researchers even identified DNA from fin, whales, and deer, proving evidence that Vikings hunted these animals for food. The presence of tapeworms at Viking sites, and even at locations up to the 19th century, further highlights the historical burden of these parasitic infections. Analysis of parasite DNA from different time periods also reveals dietary habits. In 17th century Denmark, for instance, people appear to have consumed a significant amount of saltwater fish, especially cod, while pork was another frequent source of tapeworm infections. These findings not only shed light on past health conditions, but also provide insights into historical diets and living conditions. Interestingly, the unsanitary conditions of Viking-era toilets may even have influenced modern respiratory issues in Scandinavia, specifically contributing to genetic predispositions that exacerbate conditions like the smoker's cough. In evolutionary history, human populations sometimes adapt in ways that are beneficial in the short term, but lead to long-term health drawbacks. For example, while the sickle cell trait developed as a protection against malaria, inheriting it from both parents leads to sickle cell disease, a severe blood disorder. In a similar vein, molecular biologists have now linked intestinal parasites from the Viking Age to contemporary lung diseases. As we have seen, Norse populations and their animals were heavily infested with these worms, which release protease enzymes that contribute to disease. While the human immune system also produces proteases that can cause inflammation, the body has natural protection, such as a molecule called alpha-1 antitrypsin, to control the damage. Due to their constant exposure to parasitic infections, Vikings evolved to produce unique deviant forms of A1AT, optimized to counteract proteases from worms rather than their own immune response. However, without the standard version of A1AT, the body's own proteases can freely damage tissues, including those in the lungs and liver. Although this adaptation had advantages in Viking times, it has negative consequences today. Presently, A1AT deficiency is the only known genetic risk factor for chronic lung diseases like the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and emphysema. Unlike in the Viking Age, modern lifestyles involve longer lifespans and exposure to tobacco, which worsens the damage caused by A1AT deficiency. Only in the past century has modern medicine allowed us to treat worm infections effectively. As a result, the deviant forms of A1AT that once shielded people from parasites now contribute to diseases like emphysema. This insight into the genome reveals how historical infections have shaped genetic traits that impact modern health, demonstrating long-term effects of evolutionary trade-offs. Another shocking discovery was that of extinct strains of smallpox in the teeth of Viking skeletons, proving for the first time that the killer disease plagued humanity for at least 1400 years. Just as people traveling around the world quickly spread COVID-19, it is likely that Vikings also spread smallpox. They traveled vast distances by ship, potentially carrying smallpox with them to new regions. The variola virus, which causes smallpox, spread from person to person through infectious droplets and was highly lethal. It killed roughly a third of those infected and left another third with severe scars or blindness. Smallpox alone was responsible for about 300 million deaths in the 20th century, before it was officially eradicated in 1980 through a global vaccination initiative, the first ever eradication of a human disease. A recent study published in Science by an international research team analyzed Viking skeletons and successfully sequenced the genomes of ancient strains of the smallpox virus. The team from the University of Cambridge and the University of Copenhagen discovered remnants of the variola virus in 11 Viking burial sites spanning Denmark, Norway, Russia and the UK. Remarkably, traces of the virus were also found in human remains on Öland, a Swedish island with a long history of trade, underscoring the Vikings' extensive movement and contact across regions. Researchers were able to reconstruct nearly complete genomes of the ancient variola virus from the Viking samples. This ancient virus strain displayed a genetic structure distinct from the modern smallpox strains that persisted until the 20th century. These findings are vital for understanding viral evolution, because viruses like variola can mutate into both milder and more virulent forms over time. Historians have long speculated that smallpox existed as far back as 10,000 BC, yet until now scientific evidence confirming its presence before the 17th century had been lacking. It is believed that smallpox, like COVID-19, likely originated from animals before it adapted to infect humans. While it is uncertain whether these ancient smallpox strains were fatal, the detection of the virus in the Viking remains indicates that it was present in their bloodstream at the time of death. This discovery pushes back the confirmed existence of smallpox by at least 1,000 years, suggesting that epidemic outbreaks may have been occurring far earlier than previously documented. These findings contradict long-standing theories that smallpox only arrived in Northern Europe through later events, such as the Crusades. Reflecting on the ever-present risk of zoonotic diseases, we should remember that smallpox was eradicated, but another strain could spill over from the animal reservoir. Our current understanding of viruses and pathogens is limited, representing only a fraction of the infectious agents that have impacted human populations throughout history. Apart from smallpox, skeletal remains provide insights into the Vikings' general health. Many would have suffered from arthritis, particularly in the back, hands and knees, likely a result of their physically demanding lifestyles. While bone evidence does not reveal all illnesses, Vikings likely endured various infections, including pneumonia and infected wounds, which often proved fatal until modern medicine developed effective treatments. Dental health was also poor, with over a quarter of Vikings exhibiting cavities and tooth loss. Some skeletons show extensive tooth decay, with individuals retaining only a few teeth at the time. To find out more about the severe problems they faced on that account, but also the very strange habit of filing their teeth, make sure to click on the linked video, and if you liked my content, please subscribe for much more on Norse history and culture. As usual, this was Irina. Thank you so much for listening and keep healthy. Till next time.